You were doing your thing, and someone asked what happened. Jay Leno explained that he had been working on a 1907 white steam car when the fuel line got clogged. He crawled under the car to fix it and asked someone nearby to blow air through the line to clear it. In just a second, gasoline shot out and splashed all over his face. Before he could react, the pilot light from the car's engine jumped, and suddenly his whole face was on fire. The 2022 garage fire that injured Jay Leno was not just a freak accident. Many people close to him saw it as a sign that Jay had been pushing himself too hard for too long. The fire left third-degree burns across his face and neck, but the physical pain was only part of the story. Behind the scenes, the stress he carried, the long hours he worked, and the pressure to keep up with everything he loved were slowly wearing him down. Even worse, his marriage to Mavis, which looked perfect to the world, had hidden struggles that most people never knew about. Their choice not to have children had always been discussed in interviews, but that was only the surface of a much more complicated story. Jay's world was changing, and not in ways he expected. The man who had once ruled late-night television was now dealing with challenges that few people ever saw, and every day felt like time was slipping away. Jay Leno was born James Douglas Muir Leno on April 28, 1950, in New Rochelle, New York, a quiet town about 18 miles from Manhattan. His mother, Catherine, had immigrated from Scotland when she was 11. She never finished high school, but she worked every day with determination and kept a steady, calm home. His father, Angelo, came from a small village in Italy called Flumeri and worked as an insurance salesman. Their life was simple, money was tight, and nothing came easy. But Jay grew up watching two hard-working parents who never quit no matter how difficult things were. New Rochelle was a safe place, but not a fancy one. Jay's early years were full of chores, practical lessons, and the kind of responsibilities that teach children the value of effort long before they understand careers or dreams. Without knowing it, these moments shaped the strength he would carry for the rest of his life. When Jay was 7, the family moved to Andover, Massachusetts, and he enrolled at St. John's Preparatory School. It was a strict Catholic school where rules were everything, but Jay couldn't resist breaking them. He had a natural urge to make people laugh, and he did it everywhere. He pulled pranks that drove teachers crazy. Once, he even set off firecrackers in class, which almost got him expelled. His 5th grade teacher famously wrote on his report card that if Jay studied half as much as he tried to be funny, he would someday be a big star. She had no idea how true that prediction would become. Even when he caused trouble, Jay worked hard and pushed himself. Those years taught him timing, courage, and how to turn mischief into real entertainment. Jay's older brother, Patrick, was the serious one in the family. He served in Vietnam during a brutal part of the war. A dangerous fire during combat left him with severe burns, scars he carried for the rest of his life. Despite that pain, Patrick came home, studied law, and became a lawyer. Jay admired him deeply. In 2002, complications from those old war injuries took Patrick's life, and losing him shook Jay in a way he rarely talked about publicly. He had always seen Patrick as strong and steady, someone who kept going even with unbearable weight on his shoulders. His brother's death made Jay think more about family, time, and how uncertain everything can be. That loss stayed with him and quietly shaped the way he treated people close to him. As a teenager in Andover, Jay worked every job he could find. At 14, he saved enough money to buy a worn-out 1934 Ford pickup, which he restored over 2 years with his own hands. He flipped burgers at McDonald's, swept floors, washed dishes, and later worked at a Ford dealership. When he test-drove cars for the dealership, he took the long route just to enjoy the sound of the engine. He earned minimum wage but saved almost every penny. These jobs taught him discipline and financial responsibility. Even after fame, Jay never became careless with money. He still lived below his means, avoided debt, and saved consistently. One day, his school guidance counselor looked at him and told him to drop out and stick to McDonald's because college wasn't for him. Jay remembered that comment for the rest of his life, not with anger but with determination. He refused to accept that limit. He applied to Emerson College, got in on a partial scholarship in 1968, and pushed through every challenge until he graduated in 1973. Jay studied speech therapy at Emerson. His mother's Scottish storytelling had already taught him to appreciate voice, tone, and rhythm. He loved the way accents shaped personality. But what truly pulled him forward was comedy. By high school, he had already performed in talent shows, including a famous moment where he impersonated teachers so perfectly that the room roared with laughter. The school suspended him for crossing the line, but he walked away with a lesson that stayed forever. Comedy has power, but it must be used carefully. Humor can lift people up or offend them. Timing matters. Awareness matters. At 16, Jay bought a beat-up 1963 Chevy Impala with a powerful 427 engine. Drag racers loved that model. Jay fixed it himself, took friends on rides, and felt freedom each time he heard the engine roar. Cars were more than machines to him. They were escapes, teachers, and companions. They would eventually become one of the biggest passions of his entire life. His mother taught him another gift without realizing it. Her dry Scottish humor, quiet delivery, and sudden unexpected jokes shaped Jay's comedic style. He watched her closely, absorbed her timing, and learned that jokes did not need loud energy to be funny. Sometimes, honesty and a small twist were enough. By 1970, Jay was performing in small Boston clubs while still in college, earning $20 to $25 per show. Sometimes the gigs were at strip clubs because the money helped pay tuition. His jokes were simple, about dorm life, buses, professors, dating, but people loved them because they felt real. In his senior year, he hosted campus talent shows and began trusting his voice more. In 1973, he founded the Emerson Comedy Workshop, the school's first comedy club. More than 200 students attended the first show, and the club quickly became a major part of the growing Boston comedy scene. Jay had no idea he was helping start something that would influence comedy for decades. To stay afloat financially, he drove a school bus, earning only $1.50 per hour. The kids were loud and wild, so Jay learned to use jokes to calm them down. Over time, he realized that if he could make tired children laugh early in the morning, he could make any audience laugh at any time. That job taught him crowd control and how to adjust his material depending on who was in front of him. For his senior thesis, Jay studied speech patterns in comedy. He listened to comedians like Bob Hope and Don Rickles, analyzing their rhythm and tone. He practiced impressions, especially his famous Richard Nixon impression, which became one of his early hits. Friends begged him to perform it at parties, and audiences loved it. Through impressions, he learned how much comedy depends on delivery, not just words. After graduating in 1973, Jay drove to Los Angeles with only $300 and a van full of notebooks. Because of the oil crisis, gas was expensive, and every mile felt heavy. He slept in his van for weeks, performed at open mics for almost no money, and sometimes stayed overnight in empty houses left open by real estate agents. Life was tough, but each performance sharpened him. He kept going because he believed every joke, every crowd, and every failure pushed him forward. By 1977, Jay made his debut on The Tonight Show, and everything began to change. In Los Angeles, he found early writing work on the sitcom Good Times, crafting jokes for Jimmy Walker. He even helped shape the line Dynamite, which became famous across America. Working behind the scenes taught him how to create jokes that worked for millions of viewers at the same time. That job strengthened his skills and showed him how comedy differed when the audience was the entire country. He warmed up crowds at the Troubadour in West Hollywood before stars like Johnny Mathis and Tom Jones. He improvised, teased the audience, and joked about the club's strange quirks. Some nights, people said they remembered Jay more than the main performers. These moments trained him to handle any room, even difficult ones. By 1976, he was performing at the Comedy Store almost 300 nights a year. To stand out, he once rode his motorcycle straight into the club and parked it near the stage before performing. Audiences loved it. Smoke, noise, strange characters, and fierce competition filled the club every night, but Jay kept pushing. Those crowded nights added layers to his comedy style and helped him grow stronger. Money remained tight, but Jay stayed focused. He believed that with enough work, timing, and discipline, success would come. And eventually, it did. Jay Leno's life in the mid-1970s did not look anything like the glamorous world people would one day see on television. During those early years, he was living almost like a traveler with no destination, surviving one day at a time. He lived inside his old Lincoln Continental because he could not afford an apartment. The back seat became his bedroom, and the front seat became his living room, where he kept notebooks filled with jokes and ideas. Every morning he used the local YMCA to shower, and at night he often grabbed his dinner from vending machines. It was a hard way to live, but he accepted it because he believed that if he kept pushing, something good would eventually happen. That belief kept him moving forward, even when everything around him felt uncertain. He kept calling comedy clubs again and again, asking for stage time, even if the only thing they could offer was a free drink or a sandwich. Sometimes he performed for no pay at all because, for him, the real reward was just being able to talk to an audience. Every night on stage made him a little better than he was the night before. That period of struggle built a deep toughness in him, something that stayed for life. Later, when he finally became successful, he always remembered those nights living in his car and promising himself that he would never take anything for granted. In 1978, Jay got his first movie role in the film American Hot Wax. He was paid $500, which barely covered his bills, but to him it meant more than the money. It proved that small doors could open, and even the smallest opportunity might lead to something bigger. It gave him confidence that he was moving in the right direction. He was not a star yet, but he could finally see a path forming. Jay was 26 when he stepped onto the stage of The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson on March 2, 1977. That moment felt like the world had paused for him. He had only 5 minutes, but those 5 minutes could change his life. He told jokes about everyday things, family habits, little frustrations, moments everyone understood. His humor felt real and relatable, and the audience locked onto him almost immediately. When he finished, the crowd rose to their feet. Even Johnny Carson, a man known for rarely praising newcomers, said Jay's act was clean, sharp, and accessible, and that he might be the next big thing. For any comedian, The Tonight Show was the Golden Gate. And once Jay walked through it, everything began to shift. After that successful debut, Jay kept returning to the show throughout the late 1970s. Seeing him on national television again and again made viewers feel like they knew him. He went from being just another club comedian to becoming a familiar face across American living rooms. Soon after, in 1977, he got a regular gig on the Marilyn McCoo and Billy Davis Jr. show, the first network series ever hosted by a black couple. Jay appeared in all 6 summer episodes, delivering monologues every week. He joked about current events, his own awkward looks, and especially his famous jaw, which people constantly laughed about. Families tuned in on Friday nights, and Jay used that platform to experiment with new material and sharpen his timing. By the end of the summer, people saw him as more than a guest comic, they saw him as someone who could connect with all kinds of audiences. 8 years later, in 1985, he filmed his first HBO comedy special, Jay Leno and the American Dream. It reached over 1.2 million viewers, which was a huge number for a comedy special at the time. He joked about politics, everyday life, shopping habits, and the strange little things people do without realizing it. The theater was packed with fans who had watched him climb from tiny clubs to big stages. That special confirmed something people were already starting to believe: Jay had become one of the strongest comedy voices in America. The success of the special opened even bigger doors and moved him closer to the future waiting for him in late-night TV. By 1986, Jay was touring across the country. At a show at Zanies in Chicago, a drunk heckler threw a beer bottle at the stage. Instead of losing his cool, Jay turned the moment into a 10-minute ad-lib roast that made the whole room laugh at the heckler instead. His quick reaction saved the show and became a story comedians still tell today. His tour dates kept selling out, and his energy made him one of the most dependable and entertaining performers of the era. These nights built the kind of reputation that television executives trusted. Soon, he was invited to fill in more often as guest host on The Tonight Show. In 1987, NBC made him the official permanent guest host for Johnny Carson. That meant he stepped in more than 50 times a year. Carson rarely trusted anyone with that position, so it was a huge honor. Jay even introduced segments like jaywalking, where he asked people simple questions on the street. The wrong answers were so ridiculous that the bit became legendary. Audiences loved it, and Jay's presence on the show grew stronger and stronger. By the time Carson announced his retirement in 1992, Jay seemed like the natural choice to take over. But getting the job was far from easy. When Carson stepped down, Jay entered a highly public battle with David Letterman, who also wanted the role. NBC held a big press conference about the transition. Jay, unsure of how the room felt about him, showed up disguised as a reporter with glasses and a fake nose. He quietly asked questions to understand what executives and journalists were thinking. This strange but clever move helped him shape his strategy and push himself ahead in the competition. People later called it one of the boldest and weirdest moves in the Tonight Show battle. On May 25, 1992, Jay walked onto the stage as the official new host of The Tonight Show. The premiere drew over 16 million viewers, one of the biggest openings in late-night history. He made jokes about President George H.W. Bush and welcomed Billy Crystal as his first guest. It was clear he could carry the show with confidence. However, behind the scenes, things were falling apart. The show's producer, Helen Kushnick, had created strict rules, including one where guests were not allowed to contact the show directly. Everything had to go through her. She pressured agents, threatened managers, and insisted celebrities appear on The Tonight Show before any other program. Her behavior sparked fights across the industry and even started a feud with the Arsenio Hall show. The staff was miserable, people were quitting, and agents were furious. NBC finally fired her 4 months after the show began. The atmosphere she left behind was uncomfortable, and Jay's public defense of her made things even more tense. Still, he had to push through the chaos. In 1993, he signed a 5-year contract worth $40 million, showing that NBC believed in him despite the trouble. In 1995, the show won its first Emmy under his leadership. This helped restore some stability and proved that audiences still loved him. Between 1995 and 2000, Jay reached his peak. One of his biggest moments happened in January 1998, when President Bill Clinton appeared on the show just days after the Monica Lewinsky scandal broke. Jay mixed gentle humor with careful questions, creating a moment people couldn't stop talking about. The interview brought in nearly 20 million viewers, one of the highest ratings ever in late-night history. It showed that Jay could handle serious moments while still being funny. He also created the popular segment Headlines, where he shared strange and funny newspaper clippings. Fans sent thousands of them every year. One headline people never forgot was about a man suing his toilet for emotional distress. The segment became so beloved that it became a signature part of the show. By 1998, Jay renewed his contract again, this time for $100 million. That made him the highest-paid late-night host of his time. With his earnings, he expanded his famous car collection, eventually owning more than 180 vehicles, including rare steam cars and classic motorcycles. He loved working on the engines himself, sometimes spending hours polishing details or fixing parts by hand. The garage became a world of its own, representing years of dreams finally coming true. After the September 11th attacks in 2001, Jay hosted remote broadcasts from military bases to lift spirits and show support. He donated the money earned from those shows to relief funds. These episodes mixed humor with heart and became some of the most meaningful moments of his career. In 2004, Jay hosted his 3,000th episode of The Tonight Show. Guests from past years returned, including Arnold Schwarzenegger, who had announced his run for governor on the show. By then, Jay had interviewed over 2,500 guests and achieved a place in late-night history that only a few ever reached. He had come a long way from the young man living in his car and surviving on vending machine snacks. But not every moment was smooth. On November 30th, 1995, Howard Stern appeared on the show with the kind of chaotic energy that could shake even the calmest room. Jay expected jokes, maybe some wild behavior, but not what happened next. Stern arrived with 2 models wearing bikinis, and within minutes, he told them to kiss on stage. The crowd exploded with noise. Jay forced a smile, but his eyes showed he was uncomfortable. Then things got worse. Stern began sucking one of the models' toes on live television. The audience shrieked. Jay froze, unsure how to rescue the show. During the commercial break, he walked off the set because the noise was so overwhelming he could not even think clearly. That night became one of the most chaotic moments in Tonight Show history. Through all of this, from living in his car, to fighting for The Tonight Show, to handling live television disasters, Jay Leno kept going, driven by the same determination that began back in the 1970s. His journey was never easy, but every moment built the foundation for the comedian and television icon the world would come to know. NBC later removed the entire moment from the final broadcast, but the next morning Howard Stern proudly bragged about what he had done, even though it pushed far past anything most people would call acceptable. When the actress Jennifer Lopez called him afterward, she told him straight out that it was pure debauchery. That single chaotic moment changed everything. Stern was never invited back to NBC, and the network spent months dealing with angry viewers who could not understand how such a moment ever made it on air in the first place. But the tension around Jay Leno did not stop with Stern's scandal. The fight between him and David Letterman had already been building for years. The trouble began in 1992 when the legendary Johnny Carson retired and NBC had to choose a replacement. Most viewers thought Letterman would get The Tonight Show. He had followed Carson for years and felt like the natural heir. But behind the scenes, things were not so simple. NBC ended up choosing Leno instead, and inside the network people whispered that Leno's team had quietly spread negative stories about Letterman's personal life to make executives doubt him. Some insiders even said it felt like a targeted campaign designed to push Letterman out of the running. Helen Kushnick, Leno's manager at the time, was accused of being the one who repeated these stories directly to the network bosses. When Letterman lost The Tonight Show, he was devastated. He walked out of NBC completely and moved to CBS, where he launched The Late Show. Suddenly, he was competing directly with Leno every single night. Throughout the 1990s, Letterman made jokes about Leno that didn't always sound like jokes. There was a sharpness to them, a tone of real pain and frustration underneath the laughter. Even years later, long after the ratings fights had cooled down, both men kept bringing up their feud in interviews. Letterman once admitted that the whole media circus felt embarrassing, but it was obvious that losing The Tonight Show had deeply stung him. That long, bitter rivalry shaped late-night television for an entire generation of viewers. But nothing shook late night more than the war involving Conan O'Brien. In 2004, Leno publicly announced that he would hand over The Tonight Show to Conan in 2009. He said it with a big smile, making it sound like the cleanest, most respectful transition in TV history. NBC turned the promise into an official deal, and Conan spent the next 5 years preparing for the job he had dreamed about since he was a kid. When 2009 finally came, everything fell apart. Leno suddenly did not want to leave. NBC panicked, afraid of losing both their biggest stars. They created a brand new primetime show for Leno at 10 p.m., hoping this would let Conan take The Tonight Show as planned while letting Leno keep his large audience. But the idea failed almost immediately. Leno's new show's ratings sank fast, and as his numbers dropped, Conan's Tonight Show numbers fell too. Local NBC stations complained loudly because Leno's poor lead-in ratings were hurting their nightly news programs. NBC was desperate. Their solution was to move Leno back to 11:35 p.m. and push Conan to 12:05 a.m. Conan refused. He said that moving The Tonight Show past midnight would destroy something that had existed for decades. His refusal opened the floodgates. In January 2010, chaos erupted in front of the whole country. NBC cancelled Leno's primetime show. They tried to force Conan into a deal he did not want. Conan walked away with a $45 million settlement, and soon afterward, Leno returned to The Tonight Show. The backlash was enormous. Many critics said Leno had betrayed Conan. Some angry fans called him a serial killer for killing Conan's dream job. The anger was so intense that it temporarily damaged the entire late-night landscape. The story became a symbol of how messy television politics could be and how promises in that world often meant nothing. Behind the scenes, Leno faced another storm that had been brewing long before the Conan incident. His longtime manager, Helen Kushnick, had helped him rise in the comedy world and eventually secure the Tonight Show position. But people who worked with her said she ran everything with fear. Staff members recalled her screaming daily, slamming phones, and even throwing a phone at Leno during rehearsal. Leno stayed silent because he believed he owed his entire career to her. Those years were some of the darkest days he faced professionally, not because of ratings but because he felt trapped between loyalty and survival. NBC eventually fired Kushnick, not because Leno wanted it, but because her behavior had become unbearable for the network. Years later, Leno admitted that he kept quiet because he was afraid of losing everything he had worked for. His silence revealed how much pressure he faced behind the curtain of late-night fame. After Conan left and Leno returned in 2010, things became even more complicated. Leaked memos suggested that Leno had threatened legal action if NBC did not give The Tonight Show back to him. Fans were stunned. To many, this confirmed the belief that he cared more about his career than the promises he had made publicly. Online forums filled with comments saying he had stolen guests from Conan, hurt Conan's ratings, and then walked back into The Tonight Show as if nothing had happened. Overnight, Leno's image changed. People who once viewed him as the reliable, friendly network staple began to see him as someone who valued ambition over loyalty. That scandal left wounds that still show up in conversations about late-night television 14 years later. By the time the conflict peaked in 2009 and 2010, Leno had already been The Tonight Show host for 17 years. When he stepped down in May 2009, Conan opened strong with nearly 10 million viewers on his first night. But Leno's new 10 p.m. show struggled from the start, pulling only 5.5 million viewers and dropping further. Critics disliked the awkward segments. Local stations complained that their nightly news programs were losing viewers, some reporting drops of 25%, and a few markets seeing drops as high as 50%. In early 2010, NBC made its infamous decision to push Conan to a later time slot. Conan refused and announced he would leave NBC instead of damaging the legacy of The Tonight Show. Fans organized protests outside NBC studios holding signs that said "Fire Jay." Ratings collapsed for everyone, and the network looked directionless, as if the foundation of late-night television had cracked. Years later, everything finally began to settle. Leno stayed on The Tonight Show until February 6, 2014. By the time he stepped down, he had hosted 4,610 episodes. His final episode was filled with emotion. Billy Crystal, his very first guest from decades earlier, returned and led a humorous and heartfelt version of the song So Long, Farewell, filling the studio with nostalgia. Garth Brooks performed The Dance and Friends in Low Places, while Leno watched with a tired, grateful smile. Off-camera, he told friends that he drove home every night just to be with his wife Mavis, because ending the day with her made him feel grounded no matter how busy his life became. His farewell episode drew an 8.2 rating, making it one of the most watched late-night goodbyes in television history. He thanked his staff, thanked the viewers, and officially passed the torch to Jimmy Fallon. In 2015, Leno entered a new chapter with the launch of Jay Leno's Garage. Cars had always been his escape, and now he finally turned that passion into a series. The show premiered on October 7, 2015 with 1.1 million viewers, the biggest original series debut in CNBC's history. His enormous Burbank garage housed everything from a 1914 Detroit electric car to futuristic supercars like the McLaren P1. The show blended deep car history, hands-on mechanical knowledge, and celebrity guests who tried out wild and unusual machines. In 2016, the show won a Primetime Emmy for Outstanding Short-Format Non-Fiction Program. By 2022, the YouTube version of Jay Leno's Garage had more than 1.5 million subscribers. Videos featuring stars like Bill Gates and Arnold Schwarzenegger pulled in millions of views. People tuned in for the cars, but they stayed because of Leno's easygoing humor and genuine love for engines and craftsmanship. Then came the terrifying moment that made headlines around the world. On November 12, 2022, Leno was working on a rare 1907 white steam car inside his garage. While trying to clear a clogged fuel line, gasoline suddenly sprayed directly into his face and hit a nearby pilot flame. In an instant, flames raced across his face, hands, and chest. His friend Kevin Karki reacted immediately, pulling him away from the fire, smothering the flames with his own hands, and calling 911. Leno suffered severe burns, including third-degree burns on his face. At the Grossman Burn Center, he spent 9 days undergoing surgeries, skin grafts, and hyperbaric oxygen treatments. Despite the intense pain, he remained in good spirits, even joking that he got a face full of gasoline and then lit himself up. Fans were shocked but relieved when he returned to television and YouTube with the same calm, friendly smile. The incident showed how tough he truly was beneath his easy public image. Long before any of the fame, scandals, or hardships, there was a moment in January 1976 that changed Leno's life forever. He walked into the Comedy Store in Los Angeles and met Mavis Nicholson. She was a young feminist writer who admired intelligent men, and Leno's humor immediately caught her attention. They talked for hours and realized they shared the same beliefs, especially about issues like domestic violence, which was gaining national attention in the mid-1970s. Their relationship grew from a mix of humor, respect, and a shared desire to make the world better. They married on November 3, 1980, in a small living room ceremony, simple and intimate. The date also happened to be the wedding anniversary of Leno's parents. They skipped an engagement ring because Mavis wanted to save money for a home instead. Los Angeles real estate was becoming expensive, and buying a condo felt wiser than buying jewelry. Their wedding reflected who they were, two people who valued stability, partnership, and love more than glamour. They also made the decision to never have children. They talked about it for years and agreed that their life worked better without kids. Mavis later explained that they liked their freedom and the ability to keep dating each other. Leno could travel for shows and still make it home, and their bond remained strong through every stage of their lives. In the early 2000s, only 22% of wealthy married couples in the US chose to remain child-free, and the Lenos were part of that small but growing number. Mavis built her own powerful identity through activism. She founded the Women's Rights Fund in the 1990s and produced documentaries like The Uprising of 34, which brought new attention to the struggles of textile workers. The film earned award nominations and aired on PBS and international networks, reaching millions of viewers. Leno supported her fully, often donating Tonight Show income to help fund her projects. Together, they raised awareness for issues that rarely made headlines and built a partnership grounded in love, purpose, and respect.